of course. We're going to go ahead and get started. Again, thank you everyone for joining us today. We're very excited to have you here. For those of you who have already introduced yourselves in the chat and let us know where you're from, thank you. I see that we have quite a few folks from the US here. We have someone from Canada. Hello. We're really excited to welcome you to today's webinar, which is going to give us an update on Project Mercury. Real quick, a little bit of housekeeping, just so you are aware. This webinar is being recorded and it will be made available within a week or so on our FSHD YouTube page. So please feel free to access the recording within a week so that if you have any other questions or you miss something, you can go back to it. And we do ask that you use the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen for any questions during our webinar. It's the easiest way for us to monitor the questions and ensure that we don't miss anything. You are more than welcome to use the chat, but we do try to primarily work with that Q&A box. And so with that, I am going to introduce our presenter today, Emma Weatherly. We're very excited to have Emma here from FSHD Global. She is the Executive Director of FSHD Global, Australia's leading organization dedicated to improving the lives of people with FSHD through research, advocacy, and community support. A passionate leader in the global FSHD community, Emma has helped foster international collaborations that accelerate research, expand patient resources, and strengthen partnerships across the FSHD landscape. Through her work with the World FSHD Alliance, and other global initiatives such as Project Mercury, she is committed to ensuring that people living with FSHD, regardless of where they live, have access to the latest information, support, and opportunities to advance treatments. We're incredibly thankful and delighted to welcome Emma today to share her insights and the exciting work taking place around the world to improve the future for everyone affected by FSHD. And with that, I will pass it over to Emma.
Thank you, Ashley. It's really lovely to be here, or this morning for me, this evening for probably many of you. It's just after 7 a.m. here in sunny Sydney, Australia. So it's really lovely to have the chance just to get together with all of you from the community who are here today dialing in. And please feel free to ask your questions. Ashley, do feel free to flag me down or put your hand up if there's anything that is urgent during my little presentation. I've got a few slides here to work through, but and we'll have time at the end for some questions. So, thanks, Ash. So, as Ash mentioned, my name is Emma Weatherly, and I run FSHD Global here in Australia. And we're a fairly small organisation. We've only got, 5 staff members. And what has really helped us accelerate our progress for being trial ready is being part of this global collaborative called Project Mercury. I really feel that this project has helped us scale and de-risk the drug development pipeline for our pharmaceutical partners, but we've been able to do it much more effectively because we're all working together. And so while it's me coming to speak to you today, I just wanted from the outset acknowledge our global task force members whose names are listed across the bottom of the screen, but also all of the amazing expert collaborators, industry partners, clinicians, technology experts. We have a whole group of people who are behind us and supporting us in helping fast track therapies to where they are needed, and that's to our patient community. I also want to acknowledge that Project Mercury was established by the FSHD Society in collaboration with FSHD Canada. And it's just a fantastic initiative, and the society have been so inclusive and helpful in making sure that this is not a FSHD is not a problem that exists in silos in individual countries. It truly is a global problem that we're tackling together. So I think it's great for the community to know how your patient advocacy organisations are collaborating and working together to make sure that we move the needle as quickly as we can. So with that, I'm just going to see if I can advance my slides. There we go. So I know that I'm speaking to a lot of people who know a lot about FSHD, but I think it's really helpful to consider what this looks like as a global problem. And you know, this is an issue that doesn't exist in just individuals. It exists in families. It pops up in families that have no prior history. So really, our message to the world is this could affect you at any time in your life or someone in your family. And we all know what the symptoms of FSHD look like. Um, but a big part of Project Mercury has been raising awareness of the disease and understanding of the disease, and also making sure that we are representative of everyone who lives with FSHD. It doesn't matter where on the severity scale you sit, whether our most severe patients through to our asymptomatic patients, you all matter to us. And we know that the variability in FSHD is actually one of the biggest barriers and challenges that we're trying to overcome together. And we also know that every movement does count. We're exceptionally grateful. All of the patient advocacy organisations are exceptionally grateful for people who are willing to share their story. That helps us raise awareness of the disease and also convey this sense of urgency that we all face in wanting drug development to be accelerated. So this is Maggie's story. She lives with early onset FSHD. And Maggie and her family are always so generous in sharing their story. And that's my call out to people here in the organization, around any country today. If your patient advocacy organization asks you to share your story, that is the most helpful thing, or one of the most helpful things to do, because it helps us not speak about what we think is important for the disease. A really important part of the drug development process is for pharmaceutical companies to be able to tell regulators and payers what matters to patients, and what an effective therapy would mean to patients. So having that willingness to share stories is really an essential part of our process to make sure that effective therapies are delivered to patients. So thank you, Maggie, and everyone who shares your story. Um, so we all know a little bit about what FSHD looks like, but this is the challenge that we're trying to solve through Project Mercury. So FSHD, as we all know, is a rare disease. This is not a challenge that is specific to FSHD. This challenge exists across rare diseases globally. Um, we know that delayed diagnosis and underdiagnosis in FSHD is a significant problem. One of the reasons that that is a problem in the drug development pipeline is obviously when we're trying to understand prevalence and incidence around the world, so how many cases there are um, and how the disease is progressing in each individual country. When we have delayed diagnosis and underdiagnosis, it's really hard to demonstrate and establish what the market looks like for effective therapy. And at the end of the day, when we're looking at commercial organizations that are wanting to develop therapies, they need funding to be able to do that from, venture capitalists, from other investors. So they need to be able to show that when they deliver an effective therapy, there is going to be a reward at the end of the day for the pharmaceutical company. Um, so that is difficult from a drug development perspective when we have a disease where we know that a lot of people have never had a formal diagnosis, they haven't had genetic confirmation, they may have been told for 10 or 20 or more years that they actually have a different disease and it's not FSHD. So that's a real challenge in the drug development. It's also going to be a challenge for us when we have an effective therapy. On the most human level, it breaks my heart to think once we can do something about FSHD, that there might be people out there who do not receive a therapy because they haven't yet had their diagnosis confirmed or they don't know they have FSHD. And so, awareness of the disease across the community, but also across our medical community, clinicians, and other experts is really important for us. And it's something that we're trying to tackle with some um, coordinated messaging with sharing of resources across the different countries. And we'll talk about a little bit later about how we will do that through the World FSHD Alliance to make sure that it's not just these initial countries that are members of Project Mercury, it's around the world that we can help raise that awareness and improve the diagnosis journey for people. Trial infrastructure gaps and lack of patient readiness. So if we want companies to run their clinical trials across, different countries, across different sites in the country, and make sure that geographically clinical trials are accessible to patients, um, we need two things to happen. We need trial sites that have all of the necessary, pieces of equipment, space, experts, staffing. We also need those sites to understand what is needed and be engaged and interested in running an FSHD clinical trial. We also need patients to be ready to participate, to understand what that inclusion criteria means when they see a clinical trial announced, to have that genetic confirmation, and most importantly, to be a member of their country's registry. So, that has been a huge focus of us at Project Mercury is to try to help patients become trial ready, but also to make sure the infrastructure in your country, both at the clinical trial sites and through your patient registries, um, are accessible to you, are easy to use, and that you know they're there and how to engage with them. Funding and regulatory barriers. So, when we speak about funding in this regard, it's about making sure that drug therapies, once they are approved, are affordable and that are available through public health or insurance systems, and that varies country to country and sometimes even across different regions. So that has been a significant focus of us is looking at, well, what are those funding and regulatory barriers and how do we address them on a global, but then on a local basis? And how do we prepare countries that are not a member of Project Mercury now to pick this up and implement it in their own country? We all in Project Mercury strongly believe that it shouldn't matter where you live, where there's an effective therapy for FSHD, well, we want you to be able to access it. So, oh, sorry. And slow adoption of therapies after approval. So we know that getting a drug approved by the FDA or TGA or EMA, or your country's regulator, is only one of the first steps. That does not mean that the drug will be reimbursed under, whatever your healthcare system looks like. And it also doesn't mean that it can be prescribed or administered by your clinician. Some of the drugs being developed require an IV infusion. So we're trying to look at, well, what does that capacity look like? When we are one of many neuromuscular diseases that may require, neurology support or, similar to what we see in cancer centers where people have to sit in a chair and receive an IV infusion, um, we know that the demand on those services is going to be high across different neuromuscular diseases. You can see in FSHD, myotonic dystrophy, SMA, Duchenne muscular dystrophy. All of those diseases have drugs in development or available now that may require similar use of those facilities. So being able to make sure that we are preparing the whole ecosystem as best we can becomes really important. So this is what we're all excited about. So myself as a fellow FSHD patient, we have a lot of people with lived experience of FSHD in Project Mercury. But I would actually say that everyone in that project has a level of lived experience now because um, they're all so invested and involved and riding this journey right along with us. But this is the really exciting part, right? So where we have moved in the last few years as a disease cohort is actually quite incredible. When you look back to when the society was formed in 1991, FSHD Global was formed in 2007, we really had limited understanding of even the mechanism of disease. So the tide really started to turn in 2010, where across the whole field, consensus was reached that DUX4 was the target gene. And once we had a target and we understood that it's DUX4 that produces this toxic protein that damages and weakens our muscles, the field had something to work towards. And so DUX4 became the target gene. And you can see now we have so many companies that are working on um, stopping the expression of DUX4. So DUX4 should not be expressed in muscle. Um, and when it is, that is when our muscles start to weaken and waste away. It's a gene that should not be active in muscle. And so a lot of the companies that we see in the drug development pipeline are, are going through various mechanisms to try to either stop the expression of DUX4 or to prevent the damage caused by the DUX4 protein in our muscle. And so there are a lot of ways that can be targeted. In terms of Project Mercury and the infrastructure that we're developing, we are treatment agnostic. We don't mind which companies are developing a treatment. We work with all of them. We don't mind which approach is taken. What we're interested in is making sure that however these therapies are being developed, that we have the infrastructure, partners, and experts in place to help support and de-risk that process. Um, you know, it's a great problem to have, but as we move towards the current time, um, all of our patient advocacy organizations started to see that as exciting as it is that we have this new frontier of drug development and multiple companies wanting to take their therapies into the clinic, we realized it actually introduced a new problem, which is why um, Project Mercury was formed, because we could see that there were these barriers that would be um, a problem across the world in terms of making sure there is trial site capacity, but also we realized that in our registries across all of the larger countries that we look at um, for drug development, we did not have enough registered patients who we could confidently invite to take part in trials, or companies could invite to take part in their trials, um, to sustain the growth that we were seeing was coming in the drug development journey. So an estimate was made. Sorry, my slides aren't advancing. So an estimate was made. How many patients do we need? How many trial sites do we need? It was an informed guess, but really, our Project Mercury countries got together and said, okay, what do we need to do and how we're going to do it? And so our mission is to solve challenges that slow or stop the development and delivery of therapies to people affected by FSHD around the world. Now, we are doing that in a measured and deliberate way, where we have our first 10 target countries. We have a whole range of patient advocacy organizations that are involved and that are going to be playing a role once this transitions across into the World FSHD Alliance. But we had to start somewhere. So we wanted to start with 10 countries that had organized patient advocacy, that had the ability to collaborate and move things forward, and also that we're in countries where companies were targeting for clinical trials. So our first priority was to make sure that we could sustain the trials that we knew were coming. We wanted to de-risk the pipeline so that more companies were confident in bringing their drug into the clinic. And we wanted to prepare our patients to take part in those trials or to be part of the journey. So you don't need to be in a clinical trial to support the development of therapies. And we'll talk about that um, in a moment as well. So, as I mentioned, this is not just an FSHD problem. This is a challenge that is across all rare diseases. And what we are proudly doing through Project Mercury is developing a blueprint that really addresses this cycle, and can be picked up and used by any rare disease worldwide, um, to help bring their therapies to market. Um, Drug discovery is a long and expensive endeavor. I read so many comments on the patient advocacy organizations, Facebook pages, social media pages, we know that people living with FSHD are frustrated at the time that it takes to deliver a therapy. Um, we don't want this to take a second longer than it needs to. We know that time is muscle. So, how can we reduce the time and cost to bring a therapy into the clinic and bring a therapy to the market, and then make sure that it's actually available to people? Rare diseases like FSHD have a smaller population to generate that return on investment by pharmaceutical companies. How do we make sure that that population is as large and scalable as it needs to be, and that actually reflects our patient population? And how do we make sure that that population is organized, available, and informed, and ready to take part in trials or receive therapies when they're approved? Clinical trials take a long time and they are more expensive due to the low concentration of patients. So if you're developing a drug for a more common disease like diabetes or cancer, those trial sites, can take a lot more patients. They have, there's a lot of people around the world living with those diseases. So it's not hard to recruit. Well, it's probably still difficult to recruit, but the availability of patients is huge. When we're looking at FSHD clinical trial sites, especially in countries, like Australia that are very geographically, spread out and sometimes sparse, sometimes sites can only access, 4 or 5 people. And the cost involved to set up a site and run those trials is significant. So making sure that for every site we set up, we know that there is an active and engaged patient population around it, is really important. Um, those increased costs that are involved in the drug development pipeline for rare diseases often mean that treatments are expensive. They might not be affordable or sustainable for payers or patients or payers. When we speak about payers, we're talking about insurance companies, public health systems where drug reimbursement is managed by the government, um, and um, and so that's sort of a capture-all term for anyone that wears the cost of those therapies to deliver them to patients. And so even if we run a trial and a drug works, it means that both the return on investment but also the patient experience is quite uncertain. And for me, that would be heartbreaking to think there is a drug out there that can slow or stop progression of the disease. And the barrier standing in our way as patients is that we can't afford it. So, how do we address that? And that has been the laser focus of Project Mercury. So, our three deliverables across this 5-year project. Number one is access. So, when we speak about access, that is the reimbursement and also the availability and uptake of effective therapies that have been approved. And so, we're looking at removing those barriers that slow or delay patient access. I think, it's variable across countries, but I remember reading that in Australia, sometimes from when a drug is approved to when it's available through our public health system can take 3 years. And that is completely unacceptable. I know that I would not be willing, um, or very pleased to know that there is a drug that's been proven safe, effective, and that I could have my muscle deterioration slowed down, but that it's not available through our public system. So, it might cost hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. I wouldn't be able to afford that. I know many of our patients wouldn't be able to afford that. So, what can we do as advocates to help pave the path for that reimbursement process to happen? Trial to treatment readiness. So, as I mentioned, having diagnosed, registered, genetically confirmed patients on a registry enables us to increase the number of clinical trial sites and enhance that clinical trial infrastructure. But what it also does, even if you are not interested in being part of a clinical trial, um, having that diagnosed patient population on a registry means that we have that understanding of what that market looks like, we can sell this disease. And when I say sell, encourage other companies to continue FSHD drug development, show them that there will be an ROI at the end of their journey if their drug is successful. And then sustainability. So, as I mentioned, Project Mercury is a 5-year project. We are halfway through our program now, and that has been why I'm talking to you today because we've just released our interim progress report. Um, but what happens at the end of that 5 years? Yes, we are hopeful that, when we started this project, we are hopeful that we can um, achieve these three aims. But time doesn't stand still at the end of that 5 years. We know that drug development will continue. The job isn't complete after those 5 years because we know we've only really addressed these issues on a local basis across 10 countries. Um, and we also know that the FSHD population that needs to be registered and treatment ready um, have not been identified in those 5 years. That will continue to evolve and grow. So when we speak about sustainability, we want to make sure that the toolkits and the outcomes that are achieved through Project Mercury are an evergreen framework that continues to evolve and remain updated. It will need to be updated when there are drugs approved. It will need to be updated when we have a new standard of care that includes a disease-modifying therapy, which is what we're all very excited for. So our plan is to ensure that the Project Mercury toolkits and the programs that we have developed through this project will be handed over to the World FSHD Alliance to make sure that globally um, we equip any country that has a patient advocate willing to do the work, as we have all done, um, and try to enable therapeutic development in their country or access to therapy in their country has ability to do that. Um, so they are our three aims. We wanted to approach this project in a commercially savvy way because ultimately delivery of drug therapies is a commercial arrangement. We have tried to make FSHD an attractive disease to work on. We have tried to make FSHD um, a disease that is de-risked for these companies. So what we've done is built a value network business model where we've leveraged our existing local assets and resources, our patient advocacy organisation, and our existing clinical trial networks align across countries in a common identity and mission, but knowing that locally there are, differences that need to be accounted for. We have globally relevant frameworks, but they need to be localized across the different countries to ensure that they are fit for purpose for the local systems, cultural expectations, language, and healthcare system. And sharing. We want to share across our different countries the costs, risks, and rewards, and lower barriers for all stakeholders. So patients, companies, hospitals, clinicians. And so, as I mentioned, we have our three work streams that we've been working through. So all of this kind of comes together, and then our project team divides across these three work streams. This is our global task force. So it probably sounds bigger than it is. We meet twice a year, um, and we usually have one meeting in the US or Canada and one meeting in Europe. These are our 10 country working groups. We predominantly try to meet online, in person, but sometimes, people can't make it, so they join us online. There's about 20 members of our global task force. It includes biopharma companies, clinicians, experts from countries around the world. We have a strong governance structure, and we have regular contact and reporting across those 10 countries, and we're all learning from each other. It has been a very valuable and rich learning experience across all of the countries and members. And it's truly been a very rewarding um, and fun experience to be part of this Project Mercury task force. Um, yeah, we meet quarterly online as well as those in-person meetings. And so, where are where are we at? So when we formed Project Mercury 3 years ago now, we had some targets, and we have met and delivered upon most of those targets already, with a little bit of work still to go. We estimated that we needed 10,000 patients enrolled in country registries to sustain the number of trials that we knew were coming over the next, 5 or so years. That number needs to continue to grow because I think the drug development pipeline has expanded even beyond what we first estimated, might be possible, which is a wonderful problem to have. But we have already met that 10,000 patient um, enrollment across our registries. Where we're still needing to build on that is that not all of those 10,000 patients have their genetic confirmation of FSHD on file. And that becomes really important because to take part in a trial or to receive a therapy once they are approved, you need to have confirmed your genetic diagnosis. We have expanded clinical trial sites. In 2023, when we started this program, we had 25 clinical trial sites for FSHD around the world. We now have 53 sites, and there's still more coming online. I know in Australia we have just got another one coming online in the next couple of weeks, which is very exciting. So that number will continue to climb. And, the more sites that we have operating, the more treatment ready sites we also have so that people can receive therapies when they're available. We have 10 countries with active working groups. So, as well as our global task force, each country has its own working group to implement those global frameworks locally. Um, we have 6 new or expanded FSHD registries. So some countries did not even have a patient registry, and there are still many countries around the world which does not have a patient registry. We have a mix of patient-led registries and clinician-led registries in Project Mercury, and they are all collecting, that important patient data, and they are all able to report to pharmaceutical companies where patients are, how many patients we have, and what that cohort looks like. And that has been absolutely essential for enabling, the increase in our clinical trial sites. So it's all a cycle, as we improve the availability of registries, and as we recruit more patients into those registries, we can open up more sites. And we have our 3 coordinated global work streams. So this, on one page has been the groundwork to really enable this international FSHD clinical development. So this is where we are now. As I mentioned, we've achieved our 10,000 um, patient targets. This slide is a little out of date. Sorry, we've said registries launched in 5 countries. We've had new registries in 5 countries, and Canada also added their patient reported data. We have not just expanded our clinical trial infrastructure, we've really optimized it. So earlier this year, a trial site toolkit was published in the Journal of Neuromuscular Diseases. And this enables any potential site to understand what is required to be a clinical trial site, how is that stood up, and enable those sites to be established in a much more efficient and effective way. Um, we have just added a new aim. As a project group, we are ambitious, and we realized that as we were going along this journey, um, something we had not considered was to prepare those healthcare communities for approved therapies. And so we have just added this aim last year, and are starting work to look at how we prepare those healthcare communities. Um, we are preparing FSHD care guideline. Well, care guidelines are completed. They're just awaiting publication. Our accredited HCP education plan and clinical landscape survey is underway. Under our Workstream 2 patient access, our HDA disease progression model steering committee has been established. So HTA is health technology assessment, and that is the way that new health technologies like therapies and drugs um, are assessed for economic viability to make sure that they actually do um, they're feasible to fund because they actually address the burden of disease in the patient community, and they actually um, improve quality of life or reduce that burden of disease. We've completed our feasibility assessment for our disease progression model. So that is in the health technology landscape. You need to be able to show what happens during disease progression. So we need to establish what we call disease states so that we can say, okay, if a patient journey starts here, where we have almost no symptoms, what happens as the disease progresses? And at what stage of that disease progression does it make economic sense, or does it make sense in terms of quality of life to start a therapy for FSHD? And at what point during that journey does it become not viable from an economic perspective to continue to offer those therapies? Now, we are really motivated to make sure that how we can present that journey means that we can demonstrate benefit to the broadest population possible of FSHD patients. And so really understanding what that progression looks like, having it into a model that then is consistently applied across, by different companies that are communicating with these HDA bodies and decision makers in government and insurance companies. Um, are, are consistent. We don't want a lot of different companies going in and telling these decision makers different things. We want to de-risk the process so that we have a way of consistently sharing that information and advocating for our patient community. And that is on track to be delivered by next year. The HR Quality of Life systematic review has been published in Health and Quality of Life Outcomes. So that's developing a patient-centered quality of life framework. How does this disease affect the quality of life that you live? What are what do you need from a therapy? How could quality of life be improved? Um, these reviews are really important for setting that baseline understanding of what quality of life means for FSHD patients. We've held a burden of illness scoping workshop. Consensus evidence roadmap was agreed across sponsors. So that's our companies that are bringing a drug into the clinic, health economics experts, clinicians, and patient advocacy organisations. We've had delivered a HTA engagement model to all country working groups, and we're developing a toolkit for 2027. So what that means is, how do our patient advocates communicate to decision makers? How do we advocate for our communities? And how do we do that consistently and in the language that we need to communicate with these decision makers in? And then, as I mentioned, our sustainability work stream. So we actually were successful in winning an EU public-private grant in 2024. And this is looking at locally adapted operating materials across countries. Um, Italy has been a benchmark for self-sustaining implementation of these models. Treat NMD and the FSHD Society secured the Paladin grant in 2024, and FSHD Europe has been onboarded as a subcontractor to deliver that work. So that is really the funding the delivery of our HTA disease progression model, which will be a globally relevant framework that can then be localized across different countries. Biopharma partnerships have contributed direct funding and in-kind expertise to the Global Task Force. having our biopharma partnerships. So when the task force was established, that was Fulcrum and Avidity. They not only provided funding to get this project off the ground and help us, fund our in-person meetings, um, they also attend those meetings and gave us insights into, well, what are the barriers that we need to help you manage? Um, they helped us understand what the drug development pipeline looked like, and they were very open and collaborative in sharing how we could help them bring therapies to our patients. And we also want to transition from this time-limited pilot project into this scalable global platform under the World FSHD Alliance. So we have that framework for international clinical development. We've strengthened our registries. There's still more work to do there. We've more than doubled our trial sites, but we need more trial sites. We've started to align patients, clinicians, and researchers. Um, and now we're looking to system-wide readiness, looking at what those coordinated frameworks need to be for health technology assessments. What is the quality of life evidence and burden of disease data that we need to gather and have ready for those advocacy um, engagements so that we can conclusively show decision makers what a difference a treatment would make, and the type of functional benefit that people see through receiving a disease modifying therapy. We want to lower those barriers for this whole operating model so that different countries can be onboarded into this infrastructure. And we want to serve as a template for other rare diseases to make sure that, other diseases that are facing these same challenges um, maybe can enter the market a little bit easier than what we've been able to. And just acknowledging that we've learned a lot from the Duchenne community. So this project was actually modeled on Project Hercules, which was a project for the Duchenne community to help them fast track their therapies. And so I think that is, ultimately we're wanting to make sure that this is not a time limited program. We want to make sure that this is an evergreen toolkit that continues to benefit our FSHD community. And so our next step, and something that we've already started working on, is how we transition this into the World FSHD Alliance so that any country around the world benefits, but also that countries in our first 10 target countries continue to benefit and continue to grow their capacity. So this project will wrap up at the end of 2027, and we will deliver our final impact report in 2028. Our interim report is available on the Project Mercury website. I encourage anyone who's interested in understanding what we actually have delivered to please go on there and take a look. And I've got my contact details up here. They do come with a disclaimer that I'm terrible on email, so sometimes I need a little bit of a follow-up because I do receive a lot of emails. So if you do want to reach out or understand more, go to your own country patient advocacy organization, or connect with me. But if you take away one thing from this talk, it is to please join your registry. So in the US, it is Better Life. In Australia, it is Cure FSHD, which is available through our website or through an app store. But also, I think it's the same on the Society's website. Ash can correct me, but we have links to all of the patient country registries or patient advocacy organizations where you can find out more information. So no matter where you are, there is a point of connect for you. And that is the number one thing you can do, because even if you don't want to be part of a trial yourself, being part of a registry means that you build that data that's available, you help us encourage um, drug development, and you help us communicate with governments and payers on the urgency that we all feel, and what the unmet need is in our FSHD community. So that is the one piece of homework that I give to everyone today. If you are not on a registry, start the process today, because not only will you help drug development in your country, you'll help yourself be trial and treatment ready as well, because I know we're all very excited for when we finally have that approved therapy to hand. So I might stop sharing and open up for some questions.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Emma, for that excellent presentation. Ray Jordan says this is huge. Thank you, Emma. And I have to agree, obviously, so much progress, so many exciting things, and excited to see what the next year brings. With that, we do have a few questions that I would like to ask, and I know we have about 15 minutes. So the first question that I have here, and obviously you spoke a bit about this, but Project Mercury expanded from one idea into collaboration across 10 countries. What have been some of the biggest challenges that you faced? And of course, some of the successes of bringing so many organizations together around a common goal?
You know, in terms of bringing the organizations together, that was not difficult. We have this incredible global community. Look, the two Project Mercury in-person meetings are my two favorite events of the year, I must say. Um, the people that we're bringing together, we're already under a common goal. That is why these patient advocacy organizations were selected to be our 10 target countries, because they were active, engaged, um, committed patient advocacy organizations that were identified as being ready to take this step and wanting to collaborate and be part of it. Um, I think that an important thing to note is that not all um, you know, advocacy and funding organizations, even in the US, are part of Project Mercury, but it doesn't mean that they're not. This is a country specific approach, so it wasn't sort of choosing organizations that were that were the only one in their country. We just needed individual countries represented. So I think the biggest challenge we had was just geography. It's very hard to coordinate people coming from all around the world to sit in a room for 2 days twice a year. Um, it costs a lot of money to do that. But the benefit in getting together in person and sharing ideas and collaborate has been just so helpful. I think every person in that room has learnt a lot from the people around them. And there's great efficiencies and economies to be achieved by working together. Um, so yeah, I think geography was probably the one of the biggest challenges, but also, we're all patient advocates. None of us are experts in this HTA process, so we had a lot to learn. We had Josie from Zebra Consulting, who joined us for the first couple of years of the project, and she was so patient with us. We had to learn what burden of disease meant. Why do we need to prepare models? What needs to be um, included in those models? How do we localize a framework? There was so much to learn. So I just think none of us entered this project being experts in any of those three work streams. So probably just the learning process was probably the most challenging thing, but it's always easier to tackle these problems together.
Excellent. Thank you. And, thinking about this theme of geography and the difficulty there, um, so how do you ensure that the needs of countries with different healthcare systems and resources are represented while still developing global strategies and shared tools?
Yeah, look, that has been a real challenge for us, because even in the first 10 countries, though, that are in Project Mercury, the healthcare systems are wildly different. You have some countries that have a public healthcare. In Australia, we're lucky we have a single payer model, so our government has a pharmaceutical benefit scheme. So we know when a drug is approved, like our target is quite clear. We have one payer to go to. But for Australia, where it gets tricky is that the type of evidence that's accepted is different to different countries. So we have produced a framework that is globally relevant that outlines what the burden of disease in FSHD is, what that progression, we're developing that progression model to look at how patient journey is mapped out and what those different sort of disease states look like, um, so that in any country, you know, there will need to be localized work. So you'll need to have the ability to understand what does your reimbursement framework look like? What is the evidence that's acceptable? Are you collecting the correct type of evidence to be able to show those decision makers that under that global framework, locally in your country, this is what will help your patient. So there's definitely an element of localization that's required, because all of those systems work differently. Um, but the burden of disease is globally relevant. The progression of disease is globally relevant. So being consistent across the different countries, one, makes it much easier for sponsors like drug developers to have confidence to build that localized evidence. Um, and it also should, give confidence to local patient advocacy organizations in what is relevant, where do we start, what do we need to do to bring this to our country. So I think there are still definitely local challenges, but it makes it a little bit more achievable and maybe more organized across different countries.
Thank you. A question that's more about the patient perspective, right? So, how might an individual counter the perception that some people hold, including some of those with FSHD, that pharmaceutical companies are in it for big profits and therefore not to be trusted? It seems that people don't understand the expenses involved in developing new treatments, etc. Any advice you can offer there in terms of how, to raise awareness?
Yeah, look, I think it's a valid concern, but I kind of flip that and think they're not going to make a lot of money unless their therapy works. So I actually hope a lot of people make a lot of money from FSHD, because it means that they can't make money unless the therapy works, and unless, we've been able to demonstrate that it fundamentally makes a difference to patients. And so, yes, they are commercial organizations. They are looking for return on their investment. Drug development costs millions upon millions of dollars. And so I think we need to think logically about that companies are not going to be able to sustain that level of investment unless there is a return at the end of the day. Their investors will not put money in. And so we should hope that FSHD looks like an economically viable disease to invest in. We want to make it investable. And so, I wouldn't say they're not to be trusted. Uh, Working with the sponsor representatives, I mean, they are people like you and I. Um, I know several people from Fulcrum who were absolutely personally devastated when that clinical trial did not proceed. They have worked with our patient community for years and years and years when they're taking, a phase 1, 2, 3 trial through the clinic. Um, and so trust is difficult, right? You can't really tell someone that they need to trust a company or a person. But I think we can build that trust by having demonstrated results. When we start to see that treatments are working and that people are ultimately benefiting from those treatments, I think that is when maybe people will understand more. I think where trust has been broken a little is, between pharmaceutical companies and our patient community, is in communication. We've had trials where, patients found out on the internet that they were no longer going to be in a trial, and it's been devastating. And so we're doing a lot of work with our sponsors and with our pharmaceutical partners to try to improve that communication process, to improve transparency. Um, the drug development process by nature has to be confidential. So there's a lot of things that these companies cannot share publicly. But encouraging, transparent, honest communication when it's possible, helping companies. We're doing a lot of work, and I know FSHD Europe and the Society is as well, on preparing patient-facing materials so people truly understand what the drug is, how it works, what are the risks involved in being part of a trial. I see that's our role as patient advocacy organisations to help people make the right decision for themselves. And so I think it's a true partnership between all of us patient advocates are drug agnostic. So we work with all of the sponsors. Um, we don't report to them. We're not accountable to the drug companies. So we are your source of information and support in terms of understanding the disease and the disease mechanism. And we can help you make your decision and improve your understanding. We can help you improve your understanding, but your decision ultimately on whether to take part in a trial or when there are approved therapies, whether or not you want to take that therapy, really needs to be made with your treating clinician so that you take everything you've learnt from your patient advocacy organizations and your discussions with peers, and you take that to your doctor and you make your decision, because your doctor also does not work for or is not accountable to those pharmaceutical companies. So I think that is the trust cycle that I see working really well.
Excellent. Thank you, Emma. And I know we're short on time, but I did want to ask this other question that came up. Is there any compatibility between the six existing registries?
Yes, there is. So we have discussed and agreed, within our project. Treat NMD is a member of Project Mercury. And Treat NMD is a global sort of registry um, organization. And I actually can't tell you of the six how many are Treat NMD affiliated registries, but I know that Better Life and the Australian registry certainly are. Um, we use what's called an FSHD core data set. So we have an agreed data set that collects the all of the information that has been agreed via consensus from experts, that is important to support drug development for FSHD and understand the disease. So we are all aligned in the minimum data set that we collect. Some registries collect additional data. And that might be for a variety of reasons. And one of those reasons is that local requirement to show real world evidence to support drug reimbursement and approvals. So there is alignment in the data set, but there's also locally relevant information that's collected through those registries. So you will see some variation in what's collected, um, but know that yes, we're definitely aligned in what needs to be consistent across the different countries.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Emma. And we're right at the end of our time. Everyone, thank you so much for your thoughtful questions and for your participation today. As Emma shared, she did provide her contact information. So if you have additional questions, please do send them to her. Emma is, she's really good about wanting to help people. And even though we have to ping her a few times to get those answers to the questions, know that it's because she's incredibly busy and traveling the world trying to make sure that we move along. So thank you, Emma, for all of your work and for being here very early your time.
Thanks, Ashley. Thank you everyone for joining us. I hope it was helpful. And I guess just know that things are so different now to 10 years ago. And I think that um, the community should feel very encouraged and hopeful that we actually are seeing. We believe that this will be a treatable disease in our lifetime. So I think that is quite incredible, and it's really thanks to the work of our patient advocacy organizations, our research funding organizations, but also to all of you. If you don't sign up and be part of these registries, we would not have had somewhere to even start this work and show that there's a so for everyone who's been in a trial or in a clinical study or given their data to research or participated in research, we thank all of you as well because we're all in this together. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't think I can end this webinar any better than that. So, thank you all for joining us. We hope that you will join us at our next FSHD University. Please check our calendar of events, and we will see you soon. Thanks, Emma. Have a great day.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.